Hi, everybody. This is Kelly. Thank you for joining us, whether it's lunchtime or potentially happy hour, afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Kelly, and I'm so glad to be with you today and talk about Tech for Campaigns. I started working with Tech for Campaigns a couple of years ago, starting actually as a volunteer, and now I'm on the board. And just briefly, why am I so involved with Tech for Campaigns? I think, like a lot of you, after Trump won, and I sort of was like shell shocked, I went on a long journey with every single left-leaning organization, looking for my place, looking for a place to have impact. And I decided to focus on Tech for Campaigns, which I've done for the last couple of years for a couple reasons. One, and Jessica will bring this to life a lot more for you in a couple minutes, is the high ROI. I felt like my time and my money was very well spent at TFC in terms of what I got out of it. The other thing is the focus on the states, which, again, prior to Trump's election, I was pretty ignorant about the Democratic Party and how we were doing in each of these states. And, as we all watch the Supreme Court confirmation hearings, it's just so obvious how important the states are with Roe and things like that in jeopardy. And then also, seeing those long lines in Georgia and elsewhere and thinking about voter suppression. So really focusing on states, super important. Getting rid of Trump, is necessary, but definitely not sufficient, and really laying that foundation at the state level so that we can build on any sort of gains that we may get this cycle. And then the other thing is, my background is data and analytics, and it was very comforting to be within an organization that was very data driven, which doesn't happen all the time, and TFC is, and that was very nice for me as well. And then the other reason was, spending time with Jessica Alter, who's the co-founder and CEO of Tech for Campaigns, who I'd like to introduce now, a super impressive person. Before starting TFC, she had a successful career in tech, co-founding multiple successful startups. She was also named by Fast Company as one of the 100 most creative people in business, which I totally agree with. And so with that, I will turn it over to Jessica Alter.
Thanks, Kelly. I really appreciate everyone being here. First and foremost, to Mayor Pete and Representative Moore, who is not only on the TFC advisory board, but has become a friend. We're excited to hear from them. So I'll try to be as brief as I can with explaining TFC to everyone. And I think importantly, sort of why we exist. The other big thank you goes to all of our hosts who have been just extraordinary in bringing this event together. And thanks everyone, of course, who's here for joining us. I think my story is not that different from a lot of other people's who are probably listening right now. I was pretty uninvolved in politics before 2016, even before 2017. And in 2017, when the first Muslim ban hit, I had this imaginary conversation with my grandmother, who's a survivor, where I was telling her about what was happening. And her first question to me was, well, what are you doing about it? And all I could say at that time is, well, I'm yelling at people on social media who already agree with me. And just to be honest, it didn't feel like a good answer. So myself and two other tech founders started Tech for Campaigns to fill a pretty big void in the Democratic campaign space. And to take you through why and what we've done, I'm just going to briefly go over basically three numbers. And I'll screen share so you can have a visual of them. The first number is 3 to 5 cents, which is despite all of the attention that digital media gets in politics, that is the amount for every donor dollar in 2018 that went to digital. So politics is still very much a TV and mail run industry. Digital is really tertiary. That's true generally, but it's honestly worse with the Democrats. I think we're catching up, but we're 8 to 10 years behind. And don't take my word for it. There's data to support it and other people talking about it. And as someone who comes from the tech world, one of the things we saw that really bothered us was a lot of the tools that were being built, especially at the presidential level and in other places, were not going to help anyone else after those campaigns. So they were sort of being thrown out. And even, in the height of COVID, when digital was really the only way to reach people, we saw Trump outspending Biden 2-1 on Google. So this is a big hole and a big problem. People are spending 7 to 8 hours a day online. It's not cool to be on digital. It's a must. The second number is 1,000, which is the number of seats that the Dems lost at the state legislative level from 2009 to 2017. It was a bit of a decimation. Now we've gained back about a third of those seats, but we still have a lot of climbing out to do. And you might be asking yourselves, well, that sucks, but I don't live in Wisconsin or I don't live in Texas, so why does it matter? And I think we'll talk more about that with Mayor Pete and JA for sure, but I just want to give a couple quick examples that I think are extremely timely. The first is voting. So just to be really clear, voting rights are state rights. They are decided at the state level. And it's really, really important that everybody understands that these are laws passed in large part by the state legislature. So as an example, you don't live in Wisconsin, but it's a state that Trump won by only about 23,000 votes. And it was found out afterwards that the Wisconsin legislature in pre the 2016 election passed a voter ID law that prevented about 300,000 people from voting. So these laws are really, really far reaching and really important, and they're decided by the state legislatures. Similarly, a woman's right to choose, which is, of course, now at risk with Roe v. Wade potentially being overturned. We won't live in a nation where abortion is illegal. We'll live in a nation where the states decide, and if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And so that's a really important piece of legislation that the states will be deciding. But this is true across almost every major issue. Healthcare, Jay can talk about, he's leaving this after this call. He is going to sign a bill into law to bring mental health to schools in South Carolina. So it's almost every major issue that people care about. And the cherry on top is that state legislatures actually control federal redistricting. So after the 2020 census, which is a whole nother call, there'll be redistricting done where we redraw the lines at the federal level. And in most states, the party that controls the state legislature will draw those lines. And this was the Republican strategy from the beginning. They wanted to control that, and they have, and that's why it's taken us so long to climb out, because the lines are drawn, for lack of a better term, unfairly. And the last number I want to go through, it's actually two numbers, so I'm being a little unfair, but I think everyone knows this guy, Lindsey Graham. He, directly before he became US Senator in South Carolina, where JA hails from, he was a South Carolinian state rep, like JA. So this is not only like where the talent is coming from, but it's also a much cheaper race to run. The average race is about $125,000. And instead, we're spending just this year $86 million to beat him. And what the Republicans decided is we're going to spend $125,000 every day because it's a better ROI, and we want to have ROI-based decisions. So it's not that beating Lindsey Graham now isn't important. It's just that, as Kelly said, it's not sufficient, and we need to be paying attention to the state legislatures where we can beat these people for just a fraction of the money. So how does Tech for Campaigns come in? We have built really a permanent tech and digital arm for the Democrats that serves to help with technology tools, talent, and training. And the strategy is to focus first on state legislative races. So that will be true through 2020. On the technology front, We actually have a full-time team that is building tools that get used across states and campaigns, but also come November 4th, they won't throw those out. They'll still be investing in them. We have talent, which is a hybrid between our amazing full-time team that, we have state directors and campaign relation managers, but the digital work we're doing for these state campaigns, that includes building websites, running their ads programs like we're doing with JA, that includes running their email programs, texting, data analysis. That's done by a community that numbers almost 15,000 tech workers that are volunteers. And then the third piece is training, where we're actually going into the states and doing tech and digital training, just so these candidates and their staffers know what's possible, not to make them experts. Because as a symptom of the problem, there isn't standard tech or digital training for Dems or their staffers. So in the vein of social media, there's a meme right now, how it started, how it's going. And this is a text that I sent to one of my co-founders, Pete Kazanji, in 2017, with just a simple idea of bringing the tech and digital expertise to candidates. And then you can see how it's going. We have almost 15,000 volunteers. We've helped 468 campaigns on 643 projects. We have 3 tools that are being used right now. And importantly, we've helped to flip 3 state chambers and break 2 GOP supermajorities. And again, the ROI on state races is very high, but the ROI with Tech for Campaigns is as well, because for each state that we go into, we need 1 full-time person. So what that looks like, you can see in Texas, we have 29 campaigns, but we have 1 full-time state director that we can fund for about $100,000. And all of the digital work is done by our volunteer teams, and that person choreographs and oversees it. So it's sort of a double ROI, because you're getting a high ROI in the States and a high ROI with how our operations work, both between the leverage with tech tools and the volunteer network. And importantly, if you're gonna help states, you need to be able to scale. And in addition to all of this work that we're doing this year, we have a pretty large digital vote by mail registration program that Rob Goldman, one of our hosts, helped to kick off with us. We're running it in 5 states right now to help infrequent and first-time voters register to vote by mail, which will be a big part of getting those kinds of voters voting this year. So there's a ton of work going on. This program is being also run by our full-time team. And before I keep going, I want to introduce, I think, one of the reasons that a lot of you are here, someone who needs very little introduction, but I'll give him one anyway. Mayor Pete, who is the former mayor of South Bend, but also former presidential candidate, and has recently started Win the Era, which I think in a similar vein to Tech for Campaigns is really focused on the up and coming leaders of the Democratic Party. And we're really excited to have him join us tonight. So today, I should say. Mayor Pete.
Thanks so much, Jessica. And I'm such a fan of your leadership and the work that Tech for Campaigns is doing. So I'm really excited to be here. Also love that I'm sharing a program billing with J.A. Moore, who you're going to hear about soon, one of the candidates that we're really excited to support. I think that both Win the Era and Tech for Campaigns have converged on, which I love. Look, there's no question that this presidential election is the election of our lifetimes. And I'm doing, when I said I would do anything to make sure that we win, I meant anything, even going into the lion's den at Fox News, or what was even more of a mental commitment, which was going into the mind of Mike Pence in order to help with debate prep for a couple of weeks. So literally anything to get that done. But we cannot get caught treating the presidency like the only office that matters. And what I really love about Tech for Campaigns is their focus on these critically important state races that decide so much about life in America. And I don't only mean the bench. It's definitely the case that the leaders we're investing in now and supporting now are very likely to produce some of the most important leaders at the federal level tomorrow. But I also hope we can break out of the idea that this is just about those who will graduate to do federal work. Part of the American system of government, certainly part of the political reality today, is how much power there is in the decisions being made in these state legislative bodies. So state politics is important, not just because it's the future, but because it's very much the present. As you saw in some of the numbers that Jessica went through, conservatives, Republicans, cleverly and patiently invested in and built their majorities, sometimes quietly out of view, shaping everything from the federal districts and the way they were drawn and congressional races that followed to policies around the most important issues that we care about, from choice to LGBTQ equality to common sense gun law or the lack thereof. To basic economic and racial justice issues, and of course, healthcare, just to name some of what's at stake in these state races. And we've got to make sure that we are competing in an area where, as Jessica said, there is a huge return on the investments that we're going to make. And what's so great about Tech for Campaigns is the way that brings together that focus that I wish we had more of in our party on those state and also local races deserve a lot of attention. And the unlocking the power of technology. Much has been made of the many ways in which technological manipulation and dirty tricks played a role in certainly the 2016 election and a lot of other things going on. But I'm not just worried about the nefarious things that go on, just in terms of above board tech spending and use of digital media. The reality is our party, even though we want to think of ourselves as the smart ones and the tech savvy ones, the reality is we have been outclassed at times in the past, and we cannot allow that to happen in the present or continue into the future. And that's why the remarkable combination of resources, technological tools and platforms, and the most important thing of all, people, the thousands of volunteers, and the level of talent the Tech for Campaigns is mobilizing for these important campaigns. This is critically important in order for us to get ahead. And I say this as somebody who's convinced that what's at stake is not just this election, but the era we're going into. That's why we called our organization Win the Era, because I think the era ahead of us is about to be decided. We're living at one of those moments in between chapters in the American story. And whatever's about to come next isn't like what we grew up with. And it could be much better and it could be much worse. And that's going to be decided right now. I'm convinced that the 2020s will go down in history as the deciding decade for the American project in our lifetimes. And in turn, that so much about the 2020s will depend on what's going on right now. So that's the value of what you're investing in by being part of this. And it's why Win the Era is excited to team up with Tech for Campaigns and get us the right kind of leaders. Everything about this is personal. It's personal for all of us in different ways. I know that J.A. got into politics because of how his life was personally impacted by policies and leadership or lack thereof. I'm sitting here wondering whether the very existence of my marriage is under threat right now because of what's going on in our political landscape. And since I know I'm largely preaching to the choir, I don't have to convince you why it's important to support Democrats, but I do want to take a moment to motivate you, knowing how many demands are being placed on your time and perhaps on your treasure as well. To just pause for a moment and think about why it's personal for you, how you and your life, what your day is going to be like when you get up in the morning tomorrow, how people you love, in the most direct and personal and intimate and concrete ways, are going to see life get better or get worse based on the decisions made by the people we send into those buildings, not just in Washington, D.C., but in state capitals throughout the land. I've got my list, and I know you can think of yours too. And that's why we're in this. That's why I'm grateful for your attention and for the innovation that goes on with this organization. And with that, I'll end my monologue so you can hear from my friend J.A.
Thanks, Mayor Pete. I couldn't agree more on thinking about why it's personal for you. And I think it's a great segue into JA. When we were on our first call ever when I met JA, he just cut right to it and asked me the hard questions. And since then, he's not only become a member of our political advisory board at Tech for Campaigns, but again, a friend who I text and ask for advice because he tells it like it is, which is not always the case. And I know he has his own personal story to share. So without further ado, JA, want to take it away?
Yes, JA, I'll take it away. Um, uh, Everybody, I just want to thank y'all so very much for taking the time in your busy schedules. We're all so busy doing this this election season, but during this global pandemic and economic uncertainties and social unrest. But I'm literally humbled to be on this call with two individuals that I consider friends and mentors and like everything else in between. When I first met Pete, it was a phone call, and as you all saw from his remarks just a few moments ago, like his thoughtfulness in his conversations with people resonated so much with me. That's why I was so proud to endorse his campaign for president and work really hard here in South Carolina to make sure that his message got to the people here in South Carolina, and why I'm honored to be a part of Win the Era as far as an endorsed campaign. And Jessica, when we first met, she's right. We spoke very candidly and open with each other, and she's become a fast friend, a confidant, and we bounce ideas out all the time. And I'm not going to be in front of you all long with my story because I can get long-winded. But I decided to run for office. Really, it happened for me in 2015 in a way. My life changed in 2015. Before, I was a chef, a restaurant owner and operator, and I was engaged in politics because my dad was a civil rights leader. But I never saw myself as like being up front. I was always the guy behind the scenes or whatever. But in June of 2015, like my whole life changed. My sister was tragically murdered while teaching Bible study at Mother Emanuel AME Church here in Charleston. And that event, I mean, it literally changed my life. I came very, very politically motivated to do something as it related to the systemic racism here in South Carolina and across the country, the need for smart, sensible legislation as it relates to gun violence. And I would go to the elected officials and different people in leadership and ask for help, and they did a lot of lip service. And as Jessica told you, I'm not a person that goes well for lip service. I'm the type of person that strongly believe in let the work I've done speak for me. And I woke up on the 31st, actually the 30th of March of 2018, and I decided to do something. I ran for office and beat the incumbent of District 15, who had been there since the district was drawn after the 2010 census. And that's really my story. And I've been fighting like hell for people ever since, as it relates to mental health. We talked about after this, we're going to be signing into law my Health Education Act, which deals with mental health in our public schools. Talking about gun legislation, we've done a lot around that. We've done a lot around environmental justice and water purity issues here in South Carolina, and so many other topics. But I will say this, the great thing about this organization, which all of you that are on this call already know, is that I remember in 2018 when I was running for office, trying to navigate how to use social media and digital marketing. I tell you, it was, I felt like a guy, I was born in the 1980s. I felt like a guy that was born in the 1940s. But we kind of struggled that first election of figuring out how to navigate social media and how to navigate other digital platforms. And Tech for Campaigns, collaborating with them, and they have a team of people that are working with my team on really being able to target and communicate directly to voters and the people in our district. It's been phenomenal. Um, I'll tell a quick little story. I was having a conversation just a couple of days ago with Democratic leadership here in South Carolina, and they really didn't understand. So, Jay, why are you spending all your digital money on Facebook? That's not considered digital marketing. You need to be on ESPN and stuff like that. And I remembered when I was listening to the person tell me how what I wasn't doing correctly, that I was the same way. I didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I was like, man, I should be on ESPN and these other sites, but what I learned from Tech for Campaign is that the smart way to use my resources? Is it really going to communicate with the voters? And so I'm just so excited to be a part of this organization. I'm excited to get into this conversation with two people that I consider friends and colleagues and mentors and everything else in between. So I'm looking forward to this conversation, y'all. Thank y'all so much for listening a little bit to my story.
Thank you both. I think before, or as a segue, one of the things that we've been talking about at Tech for Campaigns is obviously the importance of states, but just since Trump announced his COVID diagnosis, which of course is consequential, but I think there's been a lot of coverage around who at the White House has COVID. Just during that time, there's been more things going on in the states for voting rights than we can count. 3 different states had their voter registration sites go down. Texas governor made it so that drop boxes can only be 1 per county. And just to give you a sense, Harris County has 5 million people. So and 1 drop box. And in South Carolina, there was a ruling by the Supreme Court that people still needed to have a witness for their absentee ballot. And I think when people see this kind of news, they get very discouraged. How do we help them? This is for all of us, Mayor Pete and Jay in particular. How do we help them not be discouraged when they see this kind of constant news cycle of, Governor Abbott and South Carolina and, Virginia's website going down?
To me, the biggest thing is to make sure people have a sense that you can do something about it. Look, our democracy is proving to be rickety in a lot of ways, and the seams and the flaws in the system are becoming visible, including the ways that it can be manipulated and suppressed. And we're going to have to reform and deal with that and pay more attention to that than ever. But there's also something we can do right now, and that is to make sure there's a political price to be paid for those who would make it harder rather than easier for folks to vote. And by the way, what an expression of low confidence in their own ideas and beliefs and ability to communicate them. It shows that they think for some voters, rather than compete for them, the best thing they can do is make it harder for them to vote at all. This is exactly why we need everybody to come out and vote. We need everybody to be conscious that their moment of maximum empowerment is the moment you go in and fill in that ballot. And that's exactly why they're trying to make it harder. And then on the back end, we've got to be on guard against some of the efforts that are going to come through to try to delegitimize votes that did happen. It may take a little while to count up some of the votes in some of the states. That's actually a sign of people doing their job with integrity, but we know that there will be an agenda to present it otherwise. So we need to make sure voters are conscious of the power that comes with that eligibility. And then by high tech and low tech means, support them in checking whether they're registered, fighting back any efforts to disfranchise them, and ensuring that it is as easy as we can make it for them to exercise that right.
And I agree definitely, Pete, that it's just so important, and it shows how lack of confidence they are in their message and their policies, that they're trying to suppress the vote. The talk, when Jessica mentioned the whole witness signature thing, it's so personal to me because my mom was the lead plaintiff on that case that went to the Supreme Court. My mom is hopefully she don't get mad I tell her age, but she's 68 years old. She lives alone. And, this COVID, she has diabetes, so she has a pre-existing condition. So she's very concerned with, being around people during this COVID pandemic. And so, she was talking to me about it. And she also has a sister that lives alone as well, that's even more closed guarded during this time. And so that's how she became a plaintiff of this lawsuit. And what's so problematic about all that we're seeing across this country is that no matter what happens, because they're still fighting it in the courtrooms as we speak, no matter what happens, it's already done what the Republicans want, is cause confusion. And that's really what they want. It's already disrupting and disfranchising so many people because of all the confusion that they're causing. We also voted on, at the state legislature, voted on drop boxes. And in South Carolina, they put something in place through the legislature that now it's in legislation, so they can't have drop boxes at county offices. I mean, it's very problematic, but we can do something about it. And Pete, you're right. We have to make sure that it's not just making sure that we get people that we know in our households out to vote. We have to get everybody we know, and even people we don't know, out to vote. It's critically important that we do it this time, because so many people are being disenfranchised. And I'm telling folks, it's not just people of color, it's older people, it's people that think progressively, it's young people. They're trying to support. We haven't even mentioned, the fact that in most college campuses across the country, young people aren't allowed to vote where they are at the college campus if they have to do absentee.
We're taking questions now, so you can add your questions to the Q&A, but Stephanie, who has made this whole event happen, is gonna feed us some questions.
They're really coming in, so let's see how many we can get done here. So the first question is a dual question. The first part will be for Jessica, and the second part I'm sure everyone will have at least 2 cents on it. So how do you decide which states to invest in at TFC? And then also, what do you think technology can do to help fight voter suppression where it still exists, or if the state legislature is unlikely to go blue for the foreseeable future? And that's from Anne. Thanks, Anne.
Sure. As you said, I'll take the first part. We can all take the second part. The way that we decide on which states to help, 99% of the time, we decide through data. So we have a data team that we like to say builds a 538 for the states. And so we score every district in every state, and then we roll that up to see which chambers, a Senate or a House, need our help. And need our help could be that they are going to flip, or we think they could flip. And importantly, we think flipping is a 2 to 3 year process, not just this year you're going to flip it. Where we think they need defending. So for instance, like in New Hampshire, there's a slim majority this year, and we're helping there. Or where we think we could break a Republican supermajority, which maybe you can talk about. But that's where like the worst possible things go to happen. It's why women don't really have a right to choose in most southern states, because even though it's not actually illegal, it's effectively illegal. And so we spend time there too, trying to make things happen. And then we pick the states, and then we go to the caucuses in those states and we partner with them. So we don't just sort of parachute in and say, oh, we're your tech saviors and we're here, aren't you so happy? We actually partner with the people on the ground, and we choose the campaigns with them, and they directly introduce us. So we support campaigns based on a mutual agreement with the caucus. And then the second part is, how do we use technology to, can you repeat it, Stephanie?
Yes, how can we use technology to help fight voter suppression, especially, and educate about it, especially in states where we don't see the state flipping for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I'll start and then welcome you guys to join in. I think, the one thing about, at least paid social media or digital advertising is there is a finite amount of inventory. So if you can build some of that inventory and buy a lot of it and be ready, then you can actually, for lack of a better term, be the ones out there clogging the pipes with information that is true. So that's number one. Number two, and this is part of Tech for Campaign's mission, is you need to always be ready. You need to have a permanent force that's ready to do this and ready to respond digitally. TV is great, we're all for it. Mail's great, we're all for it, but the mix is off. And so you need to constantly be ready to fight this. I think Mayor Pete mentioned that we sort of got outgunned, not just on digital, but honestly, strategically at the state level. And we need to be thinking about this all the time, not just, you know, in a census year. We need to be prioritizing this stuff all the time, be thinking about it all the time, and have a long-term strategy. So that's the beginning of it. Mayor Pete, did you want to chime in?
Only to just echo and reinforce some of what you were saying, because I think this strategy is so smart. First of all, the importance of partnering with it, not just throwing resources at the caucuses, and making sure that you're in dialogue with the parties. And you know, for our part, we really pay attention to those races where the whole chamber is just a handful of seats away, and they're a handful of seats, often relatively inexpensive campaigns if resources are used well. But also breaking a supermajority is a huge. Living in a state like Indiana, I can tell you how much of a difference that makes. And so it may not feel like a state's within our grasp, but just that difference between, depending on the state, let's say, you know, 2/3 and 2/3 minus one is huge. And then there are times in our case where I think there's plenty of value, and when the era looks at it this way, and investing in candidates who maybe their seat looks safe or their seat looks super uphill, but we know that we're investing in a new generation of leaders, and that's part of how party building happens. It's part of how turnout happens, and those races don't always get the same level of coverage or attention, but I think they're vitally important. So there's just so many great leaders and candidates out there, and generational and path-breaking leaders in particular. But we got to make sure we back them up and give them the tools they need.
Yeah, I would just add to that, like, first of all, JA is one of those people. You know, he won his race. He didn't say that. He won his race in 2018 by just under 500 votes. So these are races that are consistently decided by less than 1,000 votes. So every little vote does matter. Number one. And number two, you know, people often ask us, like, oh, and are you playing in this area or that area? Basically, the rule for us is we're never deciding how, like, if a district is light blue or dark blue. We're deciding if it's like red, pink, purple. So those are the districts and the candidates that we're trying to help, and where our resources go. And one of the reasons, you know, that's another reason that we're helping JA this year. Anything on supermajorities, JA?
It's tough. It's really tough to be in a state where both houses and the governor's office are Republican, and so it's very challenging. So I'm, like I said, once again, like, that's why I think having organizations that win the era, that understand it from a data perspective of, like, it's inch by inch by inch by inch progress, it makes a big difference. And like I said, I'll tell you, just the support I've gotten from both Tech for Campaign and Win the Era. I mean, the Republicans here are on notice, and they're hoping that it's not, you know, you all aren't coming to train the caucus, which, you know, because they know the power of the organization, both organizations. So, but it is challenging to be in a state that has a supermajority. We feel pretty confident that we'll be able to flip the Senate here in South Carolina, and the State House. We got some work to do.
Thanks all. All right. I think this is another great question from Casey. What should people be doing to stay involved in between elections? How often are there important local elections?
All the time. I'll let one of you guys take this.
I mean, you know how I feel about local elections, right? And again, an area where, in fact, I have to acknowledge, if you haven't caught this yet, Stephanie's background speaks to the, I'll let you figure it out on your own, but it speaks to the virtues of local office. Look, I mean, one of the things that I think is really important is it's a way to get people engaged who may or may not be aligned around the traditional kind of political battles that consume official Washington and consume cable TV. And again, there's so much power right now. And like state office, you know, the pandemic has done two things. It's paradox. On one hand, it's illuminated how important those offices are, because especially in the absence of White House leadership, it's states and local officials who are really doing the work and saving lives. But paradoxically, it's also meant there's less attention and oxygen than ever for these critically important offices, just as they matter more. And so that's where organizations and efforts like ours, I think, need to step in. The other thing about local offices, it's always an election year somewhere in given races. And so always an opportunity to make a difference. And again, to cultivate not just people who will do other things in the future, but people who are doing really important, powerful things right now.
I think we have time for one more question before Mayor Pete has to jet.
Right, we've got one. So for Mayor Pete, you seem to enjoy going on Fox News frequently and giving at least some of us something fun to watch as you do a clever rebuttal to a leading question. How do you suggest we engage and persuade voters of a different political persuasion, either personally and via online and public forums? And that's from Fred.
So I think that, you know, it begins with just going there. I mean, talking to people and engaging them, whether that's physically when there's a chance to campaign in conservative areas, or broadcast-wise when there's a chance to go on to conservative media, or digital. And, you know, it also starts with taking other people seriously, trying to figure out why they come at the world the way they do. And, you know, a lot of times it's because they get different information, almost literally live in a different reality. And we shouldn't be surprised if they don't understand our perspective when they've perhaps never heard it. So, you know, the more we can find ways that take people seriously as human beings, but also stand very seriously for our own values, and do it in a way that ties back to results and things that all of us can agree we want to see more of, in terms of the desire for more safety and justice and equity and decency in this country. I think there's a better opportunity than ever for realignment. It doesn't mean you're going to get everybody. He's going to have his whatever percent he's going to have will be there. But there are an awful lot of other people, more than you would think, who have been in a lifelong habit of voting a certain way, but have been shaken loose from that by either the conduct of this president or the nature of these times. And that presents a once in a generation moment to draw new people into the fold. And I hope we don't miss that chance.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pete, for joining us. We're going to stay on with JA and take questions, but we'll wave goodbye to Mayor Pete. We have a bunch more questions to get to, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Keep up the great work. Great seeing you all. And thanks everyone for the support.
Thanks.
Thank you, Pete.
All right, Steph, keep the questions coming.
Here we go. How is TFC thinking about the next wave of midterm elections? What excites you all the most in TFC's long-term vision?
I mean, again, the vision of TFC is long-term. The word permanent isn't an accident. It's definitely there intentionally. So we don't have an organization in or around the Democratic Party right now whose main focus is to help with tech and digital. And what that means then is it's nobody's primary job, which, you know, I think anyone who has worked on anything before where you have to prioritize knows that means it just doesn't get the time and attention it deserves. And we won't win at tech and digital if no one's prioritizing it as their top priority. So our mission is to be that permanent tech and digital arm. We can build tools, we can provide the talent and the training. We feel like those are the three most important prongs. And I think with that, I know that people will have to jet. So I want to actually just quickly explain how Tech for Campaigns spends money and where dollars can go to. Importantly, as I said, the ROI with Tech for Campaigns is just incredibly high. Like JA, I'm a very, very direct person, which is one of the reasons we get along so well. So I can confidently say it's the highest ROI in politics, both because we use the volunteer teams and technology, but also because we're helping these state races that just have outsized impact, and we're able to scale. So basically for $1,000, we can run 2 digital campaign projects. That could be JA's email team and JA's ads team. For $2,500, caucus can use a piece of our software. So the outsized impact is insane. If you're giving $500 to a campaign, it's definitely going to mail. There's just no question. That's where it's going. So you not only know where your dollars are going, but the impact that it can have is just far greater. And that's why this is so important. Plus, you're supporting something that's going to last far beyond, November 4th. So we hope that as part of this, and we'll continue answering questions, but that if you haven't supported Tech for Campaigns yet this cycle, or even if you have, that during this call or right after, you'll continue to support us. I think the goal for this event is 100,000, and we were at about 65K. Very generously, Stone Gossard, who's one of our hosts and the Pearl Jam guitarist, offered to match. So up to 5K will also get matched. So we're really excited about supporting candidates like Representative Moore, who, as I think Mayor Pete said correctly, they're not just the future of the party, they're the present. He's literally going to sign a bill into law when we finish this conversation, that it's going to affect, all the children in school-age children in South Carolina. So it's just incredibly, incredibly important. And we're at the, as I told our team the other day, we're at the sort of 22-mile mark in this 2020 marathon, but we have a long way to go in general. And this will go to support both 2020 and the learnings that we can get from that. So with that, we'll continue taking questions.
Great. All right.
I think there was a question on data and how we use data.
Yeah, you want me to do that one? Okay. One of the trends that we have seen is the importance of data in this work. It cuts both ways, though with people seemingly somewhat uncomfortable with the data that exists out there on them. How are you managing to aggregate data, and what sorts of fields do you collect, and how do you expect policies and trends for data to evolve in the future? That is a loaded question. How do we deal with data?
Well, I think as Kelly said, and if just to give you Kelly's background, she runs marketing at data science in a big tech company. So, and she's on our board. So I don't know if there's a better stamp of approval. But in general, we are big data lovers. We make decisions based off data. As you heard, as I explained how we pick states and races to focus on. We're also, one of the benefits that we have is because we have such incredible scale, there's very few organizations that are helping the number of campaigns that we help. We're also able to collect the data from the projects that we're running, whether that's email, texting, ads. And as part of that, we do full postmortem deep dives, which again is part of what we're fundraising for today, because even on November 4th, we need to know what worked and what didn't work, and what should we keep doing and what should we stop. And we actually turn that into reports, some of which we publish publicly. I think we just posted a link to our 2018 digital ads report. We also did one on texting. We'll definitely do email this year as well. And then we convert that also into what we call playbooks that all of our full-time and volunteer teams get access to. So we're constantly looking at data on what's working and what's not working. Actually, Jay and I had a text conversation yesterday about data from the ads platform. So a lot of our tools are actually aggregating data in different ways so that we can use it in a more efficient and effective way. So for example, there's not a really good way to see right now what's going on in the states in terms of digital spend. So we built a tool called Tabella Ads that the states and some of the campaigns and all our volunteer teams have access to, so they can see not just their campaign, but what's going on in the state, how that compares to their candidates as well. So we're using data in a lot of different ways, both to educate ourselves during the campaign and also to see how we can make ourselves better.
Great. All right. This one's for JA. What type of digital support or training have you received from the Dems?
From the Democratic Party, you mean?
Zero. No, I mean, that's what makes this, like I say, the organization so critically important is that I'm not alone in that. One of the things that we had a caucus meeting when we were doing some COVID funding, CARES Act money several weeks ago. And that's one of the things I brought up is that, we need, no one understands really, from my caucus anyway, really how to properly use the digital platforms. I mean, I've had a pretty lively conversation with some folks from my caucus about like just the fact that we don't understand how to use it. I mean, we don't understand how to use data, and the point Jessica was making about there's no one really out there from an organizational standpoint that only focuses on the work that Tech for Campaign does nationally. And so you have these consultant firms that kind of come in and I think take advantage of campaigns when it comes to now they're doing digital, but they're really a polling firm or they're a mail firm or something like that. And they don't really understand how to properly use data. So, that's a long way to answer the question, but there was no formal training on this is how you target someone in your district. And I think, and quite frankly, before this relationship with Tech for Campaign, I was just as ignorant to it. I didn't know what I didn't know because I use social media all the time, and I'm a chef, and so I have a catering company. So if I've done like targeted posts before on social media platforms, but the precision and thoughtfulness that the team that's working with me with Tech for Campaign has just been phenomenal. And the training that is provided to my, I have my comms director is a college student, because he understands technology. The training and development of him long term is going to make a big difference, not just with my campaign, but for folks all over South Carolina because of the training that they're providing for him. So it's invaluable.
Thanks, JA. All right. We have so many good questions. I wish we had more time to ask more, but I'll end on this one. Is there a way to measure to what extent social media is influencing Dem voter registration or actual voting?
To use JA's one-word answer is yes. So less so on the organic side, but on the paid advertisement side, if an organization, which is this is what I'm going to describe is what Tech for Campaigns does, uses what you call randomized control tests and actually has a control group that they leave out and a test group that they're testing messaging with and outcomes. Actually, voter registration is something that you can test, and we have tested it. We've seen a huge uptick, a huge difference when we do this, and that's why we have a vote by mail registration program. And Rob, who's one of the hosts, can chime in on chat too. But one of the reasons that we did this year is because in April or May, when we saw that COVID was going to be a lasting issue and that vote by mail was going to be a big thing, we went to go look for okay, well, what has worked in the past when it comes to registering Dems to vote by mail online? And there just honestly wasn't good data because it really hadn't been measured. So that's one of the reasons we want to measure it. Voter registration or anything where there's a specific outcome like that, yeah, you definitely can measure it online. Maybe one last question.
All right, one last question. This is from Elizabeth. Okay. All right. I've always been baffled that Republicans are so advanced with their networking, technology, and fundraising to create powerhouses like the Koch network. With so many Democrats in tech, why do we struggle so much with technology? Is TFC our answer to the Koch network? And if not, what is?
Jay?
Yeah, yes. I mean, I think I think Tech for Campaigns is definitely what's needed, and we need to, you know, through support from folks all over the country, and as Tech for Campaigns build their network out. I mean, oh yeah, I mean, we need Tech for Campaigns to set up shop in every state across this country. I mean,
Yeah.
because it's, you know, it's just vitally important, and I think the challenging part with Democratic politics, and I only can speak for South Carolina, is although I think we are progressive in a lot of ways, there's still a lot of just in, I guess, in politics in general, but especially Democratic politics. It's like, this is how we do things. This is, I mean, you know, and that's some of the you know, the pushback I've had to kind of navigate since I got elected, because I'm like a straightforward business guy. If something isn't working, we're doing something else. That's just how I am. And I think in politics, because it's so relationship driven, right, and it's not as data driven as it should be. I think that's why you have some of the challenges in Democratic politics, because, you know, the consultant that candidate uses also has a relationship with these vendors that are saying, oh, only don't spend your money on Facebook, you know, go to TV, or don't spend your money on digital marketing, do another mail piece. And it's those relationships that have been built. And I think through data, and also as Tech for Campaign grows and builds out their relationships, I think that's why the work that Sam is doing with Tech for Campaigns, as far as like the political advisory board and building those relationships in different states, is going to kind of break some, in my opinion, break some of those challenges.
Yes, my quick answer is yes. But the slightly longer answer before we introduce Jesse is ROI. So the Republicans just make ROI based decisions. They run things like a business, and we need to make more ROI based decisions. So with that, Jesse Fuji's one of the hosts for the event today, and also a member of our leadership board, and I want to let him close things out.
All right, thanks, Jessica. Well, first, thank you everyone for joining. We really appreciate you taking the time to make it. I know we're running up the top of the hour here. You know, I started a company about 10 years ago that built a lot of the tech and media and marketing tools for companies that scaled, like Uber, Dollar Shave Club, Peloton, some of the who's who. And when I first met Jessica, I said, oh, wow, she's doing this, and she's doing this in a broad strokes and in a scalable way for all of these different campaigns. And there's an internet concept called the long tail. And then the idea is, you take up all the small things that happen across the internet websites, they're actually bigger than the biggest websites. And I think that's a big part of what I believe is the power here at TFC, which is we add up all the power of the scale across the states and across what's going on, we can actually have a much larger impact. So, you know, final request is click on the link, donate, pull your credit card out. Like, we're looking for support here, and it'll be super helpful, and we appreciate it.
Thank you guys all for joining today. Thank you, Jesse. Thank you, JA, Stephanie, Mayor Pete, and a special thanks again to the entire host committee who really made this happen. We're in the final stretch, and we hope you know, we'll help candidates like JA get there through your donations. So thank you guys.
Thank y'all.